In today's video, I'm going to be doing the 2014 NBA redraft. For you guys that consistently watch the channel, I haven't uploaded a redraft in a while, but I am going to be continuing on to the series, and as you know, I've already done the 2010, 2011, 2012, and 2013 redrafts, and the playlist to those redrafts will be linked down below in the description, so if you haven't already, make sure to go check that out as well. The 2014 draft is a very interesting one, and really probably one of the best that I've done so far out of the redrafts that I've done, so it's going to be really interesting to see. And before we start, a quick recap of how I do things. I do redrafts like they're hypothetically happening in today's NBA, so I'm going to be factoring in a little bit of how the player would fit in on today's team in the NBA. And I'm also going to factor in things like how their careers have gone so far, what their future looks like, if they've hit their prime, when they might hit their prime, what their prime is going to look like, and really just everything over their careers and what their careers will look like in the future. So with that being said, let's get started with the redraft. With the first overall pick in the 2014 redraft, the Cavs are selecting Nikola Jokic. In the real draft, he went 41st overall, so he's one of the biggest steals of all time, or at least will go down as one of the biggest steals of all time, and probably one of the best second-round picks we've ever seen. Jokic was slept on throughout the entire draft, ended up going 31st overall, and really, most people would consider him the best player out of this draft. There is a player at 2, which makes it a really interesting comparison, but for me at least, Jokic is definitely here, and so far this season, in the 2020 and 2021 NBA season, he's really putting together an MVP type of season, averaging a triple-double, but we know what he's done so far over his career and what he's going to do going forward. He's a very good scorer that can shoot the jump shot, great in the post, turning around and shooting over smaller defenders, so he's a pretty good overall scorer. We know he can rebound the basketball, but really what sticks out is his playmaking. He's one of the best playmaking centers that we've seen in a long time, and really for me that's what ranks him over the guy that I put at 2. But for me, Nikola Jokic is right now the best center in the league, a guy that should be going #1 overall to the Cavs in this redraft. He fits well with them too. Andre Drummond could come off their bench, and for me, Nikola Jokic is a guy that I've considered a top 10 player in the league over the last few years. With the second overall pick in the redraft, the Milwaukee Bucks are selecting Joel Embiid. And Joel Embiid in the real draft went 3rd overall, so he definitely lived up to the hype of being a top pick. And here with the Bucks, he would fit in well. Their starting center right now is Brook Lopez, but he could come off the bench, and then they would have a lethal defensive duo of Joel and Brook Lopez, along with a guy like Giannis, who's the Defensive Player of the Year, and Drew Holiday. He'd fit in great and really make them the best team in the league. But getting back to Embiid, we know that him and Jokic have been compared to each other over the last year or two as we try to figure out who's the best center in the league. And I have to say that one-on-one, I'd have to take Embiid because he's the much better defender, an all-defensive caliber player, unlike Jokic. He's a very dominant scorer inside the post, a little bit better than Jokic, but what puts Jokic ahead of, for me, is his playmaking and his ability to make his teammates better. It's really on another level, and like I said, that's what ranks Jokic over Embiid for me, and how Jokic also has performed really well in the playoffs. But it's a very close comparison, and without a doubt, Joel is going at least 2 here in the redraft to the Milwaukee Bucks. With the 3rd overall pick in the redraft, the Philadelphia 76ers are selecting Zach LaVine. In the real draft, he went 13th overall, so he's definitely moving up a little bit here, and he's proven over the last few years that he's really a lethal scorer and definitely deserves to be considered a top 3 player coming out of this draft. Last season, he broke out and averaged close to 25 points per game, and he's picked up right where he left off this year and averaged 26 per game. And this makes you think he should go higher. I mean, really, he shouldn't because he's not a very good defender, doesn't impact the game in many other ways, but like I mentioned, he's a lethal scorer, and that's really the reason he's ranking this high. He'd fit in great with the Sixers. He'd really be their 3rd star on offense that they're looking for, and I know they're in 1st place right now, but I don't think their production from their role players are sustainable, but Zach LaVine coming to them in this redraft hypothetically would definitely help that, and they already have a good defensive team, so I think he would fit in great with them, and these are all reasons why he's going here in the redraft. With the 4th overall pick, the Magic are selecting Julius Randle, and this was an interesting pick because I don't think before this season he'd be going this high, but Julius is really breaking out this year, and so far throughout his career he's shown that he's been a pretty consistent scorer, but really hasn't turned into the star that some people thought he would be. But now this season, I know it's only a few games, but he's really breaking out. His post-ups are looking extremely dominant, and he's averaging 23 points per game, tons of rebounds, playing better defense, and scoring a lot inside the paint. A very crafty scorer now inside the paint, wherever it is. And then he's also playmaking a lot better, passing with purpose, and averaging a lot of assists as well. He's breaking out this season, and it's showing in wins for the New York Knicks. And I think that if Julius Randle can keep this up, which I think he can, he could be going maybe third in this redraft, but because of what he's done throughout his career and how he's starting to break out this season, he's going fourth to the Orlando Magic. With the 5th overall pick in the redraft, the Jazz are selecting Clint Capela. In the real draft, he went 25th overall. He should definitely be considered a steal here. And when I was looking at how to do this redraft, he actually ranks 2nd in this draft in win shares next to Joel Embiid. I considered putting him higher, but really on the offensive end of the floor, he's not much special. He's really your typical 12 and 10 guy. He's going to consistently give you those type of numbers and really just score a few points a game, cleaning up the glass and scoring in the pick and roll, maybe catching a few lobs and flushing them home, but he's all right on offense. I think his defensive game is better than a lot of people think, and that's really why he's going here at 5 for me. He's so far this year had a pretty good defensive impact with the Atlanta Hawks, and over his career has been a pretty good paint defender. So because of these reasons, he's ranking here at 5 in the redraft. With the 6th overall pick, the Celtics are selecting Andrew Wiggins. And we all know that he went 1st overall, and I've talked about Andrew Wiggins a few times on this channel, and really my viewpoint on him is, obviously he didn't live up to the hype of being a #1 overall pick, and doesn't impact the game in ways like defense, playmaking. He's not a very efficient scorer, and he's not exactly the greatest rebounder or defender like I mentioned, but we still have to give him credit for being a good scorer. No matter how efficient he is, he's still putting up about 20 points per game for his career, so he's kind of like Zach LaVine, but just a little bit less efficient and on a little bit of a lower tier. So he's ranking here at 6 for me, and I think he would fit in alright with the Boston Celtics, controlling the ball a little bit and really playing as a role player, and he can score the ball, so he's ranking here at 6. With the 7th overall pick in the redraft, the Lakers are selecting Yusuf Nurkic. Kind of a mid-round type of steal guy here. He went 16th overall, and we know what Nurkic has been about throughout his career. A really traditional big man that is starting to stretch it out and shoot the 3 a little bit now, but really is good at scoring inside the paint, a very good rebounder, and a pretty good defender as well. At times, he's looked like a top 10 big man in the league, and that's why he's going here at 7. He would fit in great with the Lakers too. Really, the Lakers look like a flawless team, but they, especially now, need some help at the big man position defensively. Nurkic would step into that starting role and really fit in great with them, so that's why he's going here at 7 in the redraft. With the 8th overall pick in the 2014 redraft, the Sacramento Kings are selecting TJ Warren. We saw just how good TJ Warren could be last year in the seeding games in the bubble, but we have to realize that that wasn't necessarily a fluke, and I think he's a really underrated player throughout his career, who over the last few years has consistently been averaging around 20 points per game, and for his career stats look like 15 points per game, and really, he doesn't impact the game in many other ways like playmaking, but I think he's an alright defender, and because of his scoring ability, he has to rank this high in the redraft. The Kings could use some primary ball handling and scoring as well, so he'd fit in great. With the 9th overall pick, the Hornets are selecting Marcus Smart. I know it seems like Marcus Smart should be going higher, but he's not, because early in his career, he wasn't doing exactly what he is doing now, defensively and offensively. He wasn't scoring that much, and because of this, he's the guy that I can see moving up in this redraft over the next few years, but we know how good he can be when he's shooting at his best, and he's a really good defender as well, without a doubt an all-defensive type of talent. I'm a Raptors fan, and personally, I don't like Marcus Smart at all as a player. I think he flops way too much on the court, but we still have to give him credit, and he definitely is a guy that I see moving up in the redraft because of how good he is defensively. With the 10th overall pick in the redraft, the Sixers are on the clock again, and they're going to be selecting Joe Harris. Joe Harris is another steal in this draft who's really proven that he's a sharpshooter and went 33rd overall, so he went in the 2nd round in the real draft, but I'm kind of breaking the rule here of always take the best overall player, because I still think the Sixers need some shooting, and Seth Curry has been a very good shooter for them this year, but if they could get Joe Harris as well, I think it would make them a lot more complete team, and then they'd have 2 sharpshooters to surround Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons. So this is a really great fit, and we know what Harris has done throughout his career. I mean, he's literally won the 3-point contest. We can't deny how good of a 3-point shooter he is. That's really all he does in his game, but because of the fit, I have to put him here in the redraft. With the 11th pick in the redraft, the Denver Nuggets are selecting Spencer Dinwiddie. Another big steal. He went 38th overall in the real draft. Another second round steal here, and another guy who's going pretty low, or lower than you expected, because in the recent years he didn't have that good production and he really broke out in the recent years. But he's another guy that I see moving up this redraft as the years go by, and once he recovers from this ACL injury he's had, I see him consistently flirting with being a top 50 player in the league, because he's a really good scorer and passer, and in terms of his fit with the Nuggets here, they kind of need a backup point guard, so it's a good fit anyway. And like I mentioned, I could see Dinwiddie moving up in the redraft as the years go by. With the 12th pick, the Magic are selecting Aaron Gordon, who in the real draft went 4th overall, and we know what Aaron Gordon does with the Magic, and he's going to them again in this redraft. But it's not really related, but let me just say that I think Aaron Gordon's probably the best dunker I've ever seen. The dunks this guy does in the dunk competition are insane, but getting back to the serious stuff here with the redraft and how he fits in, as I mentioned, he went 4th overall, so he's dropping a little bit here and didn't really live up to the hype of what some people expected him to be. He's not that efficient of a scorer, but he still, for his career, is averaging 13 a game, is a pretty good rebounder and a decent defender, and we know that he fits in pretty well with the Magic as a role player, so that's why he's going here in the redraft at 12, back to the Orlando Magic. With the 13th pick, the Timberwolves are selecting Jordan Clarkson. Another huge second round steal. He went 46th overall in the actual draft. A big steal. And I think Jordan Clarkson's been a pretty underrated player throughout his career. He's been showing that in the recent years, especially with the Jazz, he's been averaging around 15 to 16 points per game on pretty good efficiency, and he's a really good three-point shooter as well, and that's why I think he'd fit in well with the Timberwolves here. He could be a guy that drops out of the lottery of this redraft as the years go by, but because of his overall offensive abilities, he's ranking here at 13 out, going to the Timberwolves. And finishing off the lottery with the 14th pick in the redraft, the Suns are selecting Jeremy Grant. In the real draft, he went 39th overall, another big second round steal. And there's a lot of second round steals in this draft. We've got Jokic, you got Harris, you got Spencer Dinwiddie, Jordan Clarkson, Jeremy Grant. But Grant is a guy that without a doubt is going to definitely move up this redraft as the years go by. We saw just how good he could be last year with the Denver Nuggets in the playoffs, and so far this year in a small sample size, he's absolutely dominating with the Detroit Pistons. There's been games where he's taken over on offense and really scored at an extremely high rate and even scored 30 points in some games. We know that he's really turning into a good offensive player. He brings the hustle to the floor every game, a great rebounder, a fantastic on-ball and off-ball defender. As I mentioned, is really scoring a lot more these days, and when he's at his best is a very good three-point shooter. If he continues this, he could be in the top 10 of this redraft, but for now, because of what he did in the early years of his career, he's at 14. So now we've got some honorable mentions who just missed out on the lottery. The first one is Bogdan Bogdanovic, who went 27th overall. He's been a really good shooter for the Sacramento Kings throughout his career and is doing well with the Hawks right now. And he was actually a guy that I originally had in the lottery of the redraft, but since Jeremy Grant's doing extremely well this year, he edged him out. Another one is Gary Harris. He's been a good defender throughout his career, a great perimeter defender, but his offensive game has been a little bit inconsistent, so he just misses out. And then basically the same goes for Rodney Hood. Another guy who's a good defender, can shoot the ball when he's at his best, but isn't that consistent. So there are your honorable mentions, and now my favorite part of redrafts, the notables who missed the lottery, also known as the busts. So first we have Jabari Parker, and Jabari Parker is a guy who went 2nd overall and is a really big bust, and has been a decent role player at times throughout his career, so he actually almost made the lottery as well, but ultimately injuries ruined his career, and he's missing out on the lottery in the redraft. Another is Dante Exum. He went 5th overall, and he's a guy that really didn't live up to his full potential, and the same goes for Nick Stauskas. I've always been a fan of Nick Stauskas because he's Canadian, and can be a good role player sometimes, but he didn't live up to the hype of going 8th overall. So there are your honorable mentions and the busts for this draft. As you can see, it's a very good and overall complete draft. We have tons of great second round steals, and really the fact that a player like Jeremy Grant goes 14th overall really speaks to how good this draft truly is. Thank you all for watching this video. Feel free to leave in the comments what you agree with and what you disagree with my rankings in the redraft. As I mentioned, make sure to check out the other redrafts I've made as well. The playlist to all of them will be linked down below in the description. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you guys next video.